He opened his email in a desert tent, expecting a message from home, but instead found one line that shattered everything. "I've left you. The joint account is empty." His reply bounced. She'd blocked him before he could speak. But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. The air in the comms tent was stifling, thick with the metallic tang of dust and sweat, but Daniel didn't feel any of it. His eyes were locked to the screen, the pale glow casting harsh angles across his face, highlighting every crease carved by sun, stress, and now, shock. The words didn't sink in right away. They hovered in front of him like some code he hadn't been trained to read. "I've emptied the joint account. I needed to protect myself." He reread the line 3 times. Each time it cut deeper, but made no more sense than before. He sat motionless, save for the subtle rise and fall of his chest. Mechanical, shallow. Outside, voices echoed. Boots crunched over gravel. A distant engine revved. Normal life in a place where nothing was normal. But inside Daniel's world, time had stalled. His hands hovered over the keyboard, fingers twitching with a useless reflex to respond. But the cursor blinked in place, mocking him. When he finally clicked reply, it bounced back. "User has blocked you." She had not only left, she had closed the door, sealed it, and threw away the key, alone, isolated, and disarmed. He wasn't in shock because she left. Some part of him had feared that was coming. But the way she did it, the precision, the efficiency, it was an ambush with no chance to return fire. The money they saved for a house, for IVF, for the life he thought they were still building, that was gone. Vanished with a single keystroke. No call, no video chat, not even a voice message. Daniel's mind jumped to the moment he'd given her access to everything. Power of attorney, full banking privileges. "Just in case something happens," he'd said. He remembered her brushing the hair behind his ear and whispering, "Nothing will happen to you." That was only 10 months ago. Now he realized something had happened. Not to him, to them. He shut the laptop, slowly, deliberately, like one might lower the lid of a coffin. Then he sat back, staring past the beige canvas walls of the tent into nothing. Not angry yet, not grieving, just hollowed out, like someone had removed the center of his life and left the shell behind, still expected to function, salute, and patrol. 6,000 miles from home, and yet somehow this was the most hostile terrain he'd ever stood in. The desert had always felt indifferent to Daniel, neutral in its cruelty. But now the heat seemed personal. Every grain of sand grinding into his boots, every bead of sweat stinging his eyes, felt like it was mocking him. He moved through his patrols like muscle memory, checking corridors, marking clear zones, scanning rooftops, but his thoughts were nowhere near the war. They were back home, rewinding, fast-forwarding, replaying moments he didn't know were red flags until it was far too late. Melissa hadn't just left. She'd launched a precision strike on his life, carefully timed, like she'd studied the weak points in a structure before detonating it. She knew communication was restricted. She knew when he'd be too busy to check his accounts. She knew the base protocols wouldn't allow him to call her directly without approval, and she used that knowledge like a weapon. The real blow came not from her email, but from the voice of Private Mitch Carter, one of Daniel's few ties to civilian life, who casually mentioned during a smoke break that Melissa was posting pictures back home. "She's with some guy now," he said. "Eric, I think? You know him?" Daniel didn't answer. He didn't need to. Eric was a familiar ghost, a friend from high school, the kind you keep in your life out of habit more than trust. A guy who always smiled too long at Melissa, lingered too close. Daniel had invited him into their home, grilled steaks on the back porch with him, let him hold their newborn niece. And now, he was sleeping in Daniel's bed, living off the money Melissa had drained from the account they built together. Daniel didn't scream, didn't throw a chair or punch a wall. He sat with it, let it crystallize into something cleaner, sharper. Rage was fire, loud, fast, destructive. But hatred? Hatred was ice. It moved slowly. It preserved. It focused. That night, after lights out, Daniel pulled out a notebook and began writing every detail he could recall: dates of deposits, financial conversations, every piece of correspondence. He didn't know what he would do with it yet, but it gave shape to his silence. This wasn't about heartbreak. It wasn't even about money. It was about how she had turned his trust into a tool and left him defenseless while she built a new life on the bones of their old one. And now, for the first time since the email, Daniel didn't feel hollow. He felt direction. The airport felt foreign to Daniel, even though it was home soil. Families reunited in loud, tearful hugs, balloons, signs, laughter. But he walked through it alone, boots echoing against linoleum, carrying nothing but a worn duffel and a manila folder he held like a weapon. Inside were printouts, statements, signatures, dates, notarized affidavits, all neatly organized. Every page was a piece of the life Melissa had tried to erase. She didn't expect a war. She expected surrender. She was wrong. The house was gone. The joint account bled dry. His name had been quietly removed from more than one piece of shared property. But she had left fingerprints, trails of digital negligence and overconfidence. She hadn't anticipated that Daniel would build a strategy out of his grief. The legal office he walked into smelled like old carpet and paper toner, but to Daniel it was sacred ground. The attorney, a former Marine named Kendall, didn't offer pity. He offered focus. "You're not here for revenge," he said flatly after reviewing the folder. "You're here to correct the record." Daniel nodded once. That was enough. He filed a fraud claim for the unauthorized bank withdrawals. A second case, civil, was launched for Melissa's misuse of power of attorney, accusing her of financial misconduct while he was legally incapacitated by military deployment. Word spread quickly, and within days Melissa's tone shifted. She responded through a lawyer now. She stopped posting online. But it was in the courtroom that everything became real. Melissa showed up in a sharp blazer, all smiles and hair professionally styled, sitting beside a lawyer who seemed far more amused than prepared. She looked at Daniel the way someone might look at a ghost, uncomfortable but not threatened. When the judge entered, she even laughed lightly as if the whole thing was ridiculous. But when Daniel stood, hands steady, voice clear, and began walking through the timeline, the dates of transfers, the email server logs, screenshots of deleted messages, even the testimony from his sister who had spoken with Melissa the day of the withdrawal, that laughter began to dry up. Every piece was deliberate, precise. He wasn't angry in the way Melissa expected. There were no outbursts, just a quiet, relentless dismantling of her defense. By the time the judge spoke, Daniel already knew. The order came down. Assets frozen. Restitution proceedings to follow. Daniel didn't flinch. He didn't even blink, because this wasn't about winning. It was about being heard. The judgment was final. The court's wording was sterile, wrapped in clauses and footnotes, but Daniel heard what he needed between the lines. You were right. She was wrong. It didn't roar. It didn't echo. It just landed, solid, permanent, like a lock sliding into place. He walked out of that courthouse without ceremony, gripping a folder he never opened again. The restitution would come later. The apology never would. And somehow, that was fine. Daniel didn't go back to their old neighborhood. He didn't call mutual friends. He didn't scroll through her social media just to hurt himself. There was no spectacle, No rage left to feed. Only quiet space, vast and unfamiliar, waiting to be filled with something better. 2 weeks later, he stood at the edge of a kennel, staring at a nervous mutt with torn ears and a stubborn limp. "Name's Cooper," the shelter worker said. "Most people pass on him. Bit of a fighter." Daniel smiled. "Yeah, me too." He took him home that day. No papers framed on the wall, no fanfare, just a leash, a slow walk around the block, and a long silence that didn't feel empty anymore. He started hiking again. Early mornings with dew on the grass, the dog's paws crunching twigs just behind his boots. Out there, surrounded by trees and breath, the war felt distant. Melissa felt even farther. The anger had burned through him and left something better behind. Clarity. In time, he found his way into a veterans support group. He never told them the full story unless they asked. When they did, he didn't dramatize. He didn't soften it either. He simply told them what betrayal looks like when you're too far to stop it and how, somehow, you learn to keep breathing anyway. He never mentioned Melissa by name. Not once. He didn't need to. He no longer needed revenge, or explanations, or closure dressed as confrontation. He had been gutted, yes, but now there was room to build. Daniel didn't win her back. He didn't want to. What he reclaimed was harder to find and longer to keep, himself. Not the man who deployed to Jordan, not the man who was left behind in an email, but the man who crawled out of the wreckage of his life and for the first time chose the shape of who he became.